James, I'm at a bit of a loss. I'm really excited. I want to just get into making this, but I have no idea where to go or where to start. Help me. Help me, James.
Well, it sounds like you went straight into the game, right? Planning things out. And yeah.
I was like, what's this mechanic going to do? Should we have these kinds of things? How are people going to play the game?
Well, that's typically game treatment. So, and a lot of people do that. They make that jump straight into game treatment. I'm going to make a game treatment for this game and the next game. And then I'm going to compare the game treatments, and it gets overwhelming super fast. So,
yeah, well, that's what I thought we were basically going to be doing is I just didn't realize they're called game treatments.
Yeah, well, there's a few steps we could take before that, right? Before we touch the game treatments to kind of rule them out, right? It's just like further poking at the idea. So our short list from last time was we had a first person kind of dynamic narrative walking simulator, right? And our other idea that we were interested in was this herb testing clicker influencer style game. So we did talk a little bit the first time about, you know, whether those aligned with our goals, whether or not there's something that you and I would be technically feasible, right? Is it something that we could actually do between the two of us? Do we have a skill set? And those are good. That's where you start. From there, we talked about it fits in the market opportunity. Like, what does that mean? Right. So a lot of indies will struggle with that. They're like, oh, I don't know what my audience is, my target audience. And they don't figure that out until they built the game or they built the prototype. And it's like, I don't know who's going to buy this. I don't know who to market to. This is the time now to really sit down and think about that and say, okay, what's the market opportunity for this? If this is a game about spaghetti slinging clowns riding snakes, like that's a hyper niche market, right? Is it worth putting this time and effort into playing the game? Maybe, if we're doing it for fun, if we're doing it to be something that's broadly appealing and we want to maybe make a little bit of money off of it or something. Probably not, because we're only going to sell like 100 copies, right? So this is the time to think about that. Aside from that, there's also the artistic consideration. So we talked about the game. We talked about each game's general, you know, how it would play out and how we think it could work and things like that. But what about the artistic side? We never actually nailed down, okay, how could we present this game in a visual format, and how is that actually going to impact the pipeline? And then lastly, it's business and cost restrictions, right? Indies seem to always forget the business side of things and always focus on the game. If I make a great game, it'll be good. And that's only part of it. That's like saying I'm gonna make the world's best bicycle wheels, but I'm not gonna build a bike frame that can like stay attached to them. And you know what I mean? It's only part of the puzzle. So that was a lot I just threw at you. So sorry.
No, the bike one's really good because I think that's something a lot of people can relate to. A great wheel is awesome. The wheel touches the ground. The wheel is what's needed for everything to move. But if you don't have the other parts of the frame connecting it all together and bringing it back up to the person, then is there a point in even making the wheel in the first place?
Yeah, you made a frisbee.
Yeah, a really big awkward frisbee.
But I like thinking about it that way, because if you don't have all the essential components, even if you made something great the first time, right? That wheel, the moment we say, oh, I guess it's a frisbee, well, it's a terrible frisbee, right? So that's why you gotta think early in the design process and everything else about like the whole system. Does it fit together as an entire system, or is it just this one part that's really great? Because even if that one part is amazing, that's not going to mean anything in the long term. It's just this one piece.
Yeah, because there's so many times growing up that I've always heard that build it and they will come. Sure, there will be the exception where that happens, but we are not the exception.
You bring up a good, an interesting thing there with build it and they will come, right? So that is true, but it is not globally true. And that's what nobody talks about, because it's hard. Trying to do this kind of stuff, whether it's games or anything else, is really difficult. But it's much easier just to tell you, oh, just sell water in the desert. If you build some form of collecting water, packaging it, and giving it away, people will come. Well, of course, because there's zero market, right? Like it's a severe problem. People are super thirsty in a desert, and if you find a way to build up this product that's going to fix that for them, of course they will come to you. There's no alternative. right? That's where that rings true. However, we have a lot of competition. There's a lot of solutions out there. So yeah, that methodology doesn't make sense anymore.
I don't know if this is a great example, but the original Life is Strange was something that when it came out, there was really nothing else like it. And now when the latest game came out from Don't Nod, it has not succeeded anywhere near with the same kind of hype or the same kind of approach. So even if you make something that's fantastic one time, you can't just follow those same steps either to recreate the same thing.
It's noise. It was silent the first round, right? Life is Strange. It was silent. There was a need for narrative heavy games. There's always a need for that narrative element. There's a lot of gamers out there who have that kind of attraction to those sorts of experiences. But like you said, there's nobody else out there. So like you dropped a pin, but it sounds like a cannonball went off, right? But now there's all this other stuff going on. And yeah, of course they're not going to do as well because there's just so much noise that you have to be louder than all the other noise, or you have to be just as loud. And if you're not, like you said, who's going to find you? Only people who are dedicated at following you, which is not like all 300,000 wish lists, right? It's like 30,000 wish lists. Those are your hardcore fans, right? And you got to take that stuff into account early, because if you don't, you could put a lot of time into building treatments and prototypes and games and getting it to market, and then it doesn't do anywhere as well as you thought it would because you didn't account for that kind of stuff.
So, James, where do we start? What do we do? Where do we begin?
Well, let's start with the herb clicker tester. I don't know. We don't have a name for this yet, but
Well, does name really matter at this point?
No, it doesn't. It really doesn't. There's so many projects that just have like project names, acronyms, joke names behind doors and studios, right? Because you don't have a name. You figure it out at the end a lot of times. But for this clicker game, market opportunity. Well, clicker games are easily accessible. Everybody who enjoys a clicker-based game is very likely to play at some point, or enjoy, I should say, the clicker game you make, because mechanically there's really nothing new to bring to the table, right? It's all about the appearance and the story and just kind of like going through it and like, oh, is this interesting, right? And so for us, what we are doing to capitalize on the market opportunity is we're capitalizing on the fact that there's a large group player base for these kinds of games. It's easy to deliver this game to them. A lot of them will often search and explore for new idle and clicker games because you just need to log into one, right? Once a day, pick your new upgrades, leave it, come back to it tomorrow. So a lot of the players that I know in that clicker realm, the idle realm, they got like 10 or 12 going at a time, and then until it gets to the point where there's no new content in one of them, and then they just replace it with like the next one in a big rotation. So that's the market opportunity. How we're going to stand out is that humor side of it, that we're adding this live streamer kind of like overlay to it, which as far as I know hasn't been done. I've never seen an idle game that's done anything quite like this or presented it quite like this. Your thoughts on that?
It seems like there's a lot of stuff that we talked about that the mechanics isn't anything new, or like the stuff that we want to do with it isn't anything new, but different games can make it feel new by changing how it's presented, so that you can have like 5 clicker games that are all completely identical. It's just things look differently and are placed in different ways so that they feel like it's something you haven't had before in a clicker game.
Yeah, absolutely, right. And that's how you stand out, right? Because a lot of I believe that a lot of indies, and not just indies, but people in all areas of the industry, they think that just because something is heavily saturated, right, there's lots and lots of people in the space, lots of games coming out, that it's not a viable option to develop for. But that's just not true, because if it was true, we'd never see any new zombie games ever. Like there'd be no successful zombie games past Resident Evil 1 or 2 like 20 years ago, right? Like, because there's always tons of zombies, like zombie themed games. There's just tons of them. But every couple of years, somebody comes out with a new twist on it, a new presentation of the same old thing, and it's just amazing. Like when World War Z came out, like the game for that, like everybody was like, well, this isn't going to do great because, we've already gotten our fill of horde shooters from Left 4 Dead 2. And while this is exciting, it doesn't seem that great. But what they brought to the table was like, no, we're going to take the original core experience of like a horde shooter and like make it an actual horde shooter, right? Where like here's like we're literally throwing more enemies on screen than you've ever seen before. And so that new presentation makes it a standout thing in the market, even though the market by itself is like heavily, heavily saturated. So yeah, I just really want to focus on that point. So I don't want people to get discouraged from the idea that they're interested in just because there's lots of other people doing the same thing. That doesn't matter. What matters is how you plan to do it. If we recall last time we spoke, when we originally talked about the idle clicker, right? We didn't really talk about other games that were in the space. I talked a little bit about mechanics and how bonuses and things like that could work, but we didn't actually have any inspiration, which you have said you've never really played any. But having played a few, you pointed out that a lot of them are medieval themed. And a lot of them the vast majority of them are medieval themed. And I think that is a case of when you're being inspired by something already on the market too much, right? Because I talked about this with you before, where you want to have a degree of separation between like, what am I playing versus what I want to make. It's okay to be inspired by it and be like, I like this style, I like this thing. But it's really not good to just take parts of this and then just try and add on onto it, like what we talked about. And this is a prime example of how that actually works, how that actually plays out.
Do you think that comes from a lot of the mechanics just naturally seem to fit better in a setting like that? Or is it just because of, these are the most successful ones that did good back then, so that's what we're going to continue with? Because growing up, my mom played tons and tons of games like Bejeweled, the ones where you're like sliding gems around or different objects, and the vast majority of those are all, at least the ones that I've seen, are adventure themed, where it's like exploring through crypts or working through a jungle, and like that's how you see most of those that get set up. Is that just because there was a bunch of successful ones that people just have now modeled it all over? Or do you think it comes down to more of just how the mechanics work? Because like a lot of the times with those, the Bejeweled game, for example, it feels like it's not, I mean, it's just moving gems around. It doesn't feel very on its own as adventure, but it fits really well into that theme.
So counter question, why do you feel out of, all those games that it's mechanics based and not market opportunity based?
When you say market opportunity, is the first thing that comes to mind is maybe like with the Bejeweled stuff, because I guess the market for that would be typically like moms, and they're the kinds of people that, they spend a lot of their time at home or with the kids and stuff. And so maybe that like adventurous, it's like a simple game they can go to and start and stop anytime, but it also with those adventurous vibes, it's like maybe that like something they're craving. Is that kind of what you're talking about with like the market?
Kind of. So what I mean is, and market opportunity is not just demographics, right? Like I really want to stress this. Like we could do a whole series just on the psychology of like target audience, right? But demographics is only one part of that. When I say market opportunity, I'm not just talking about who would like this game. I'm talking about why they like this game. Why would they play this game? Why would people play World War Z? Well, it wasn't just that they had massive hordes of zombies. It was the fact that there were already millions of players who loved shooting zombies. So they took that opportunity. That's a bubble of players that currently exist. And here's our twist that they're all going to like, and we're going to give them something new. That is true market opportunity. You're capitalizing on an existing user base while offering something new. Now, all the games that you suggested, right, that you like, they're all adventure based, right? They're all dungeon crawlers or adventure themed or things around those lines. And here's a good example. If I made a Bejeweled style game that was instead alien egg based, and when you match up the alien eggs, they go and then like a little alien crawls off screen and you got points. Would your mom even attempt to download that or try it?
No.
No. Why? Because she likes the adventure theme. She likes maybe it's the idea of treasure hunting, which is originally where like those Bejeweled style games came from. It was all about jewels. It was all about like collecting that stuff. So the market opportunity is the vast player base of those kinds of games like that adventure kind of spelunking kind of vibe. That's the theme that they really, really like. So anybody who wants to come into that market has to, first of all, appeal to that basic level of interest for all of those players and then add on something new. And that's why you see more modern versions of those kinds of match 3 style games, right? Where you still have your match 3, but on the side over here, it's like a turn-based battle between like an enemy, right? Like I think one I can recall is like a giant robot versus a monster. And so it's a narrative style doing different levels to like match all the points, and the better points you do, the more damage you do. And it's all about trying to like beat your opponent, right? So the twist that those games bring to the table is this is what you're playing, right? Your Bejeweled column, your match 3 column, whatever they are. And then over here is the result of how you're playing. So in essence, the core mechanics don't change. But like you said, it's the presentation of how efficiently you play, how clever you are about lining up like 5 gems in a row to get like a super stat bonus is visually presented to the player as like, hey, look at my robot guy is kicking butt, or oh man, I'm losing really bad. Why am I losing really bad? Well, I'm only ever just doing 3 gem matches. Like the difficulty of the game is now presented to me in a manner that I can understand without having to do all the math and like complicated moving of the jewels, right? Does that make sense?
So is there, I guess it's a strange thing to think about, at least for me, but there's like huge marks of just people that play one specific style and they just want that with like minor adjustments and minor changes. And that's how some of these markets are still succeeding really well.
Yeah, like look at any of the PvP arena-based combat games, right? Like the newest one is Marvel Rivals, right? But there was Valorant, there was, the Cycle, there was like various forms of like, Overwatch, and just there's a lot, and there's even more so now. Marvel Rivals did not capitalize on their Marvel fan base. Like they did a little bit, but the Marvel fan base did not come to play Marvel Rivals, and that's why it was successful. No, what they did is they said, here's this massive bubble of fans who are playing all these similar kinds of games. What can we do that basically covers all the same kinds of things mechanically, right? Support classes, team-based play from and team-based play from the Overwatch games, high-paced combat with like fluid dynamics from like Valorant, and they took all the most successful components and they tried to mash it together, and then their unique touch on it was, here's the X-Men and all of the lore and special abilities. And like when we say tank, we really mean tank, not a guy who has more health, but like has abilities that affect the gameplay, etc. Right? Rivals is very good at that. But the market opportunity, was all the other people who were playing that style of game already. It's about looking at the game and figuring out, okay, what's the market that's currently existing and how much of that pie, right? If you think of it as a big pie, how much of the pie can we capture? And then at the same time, how much of what we're bringing to the table is new and interesting? If I don't do anything new and interesting and I make just another generic adventure-based Bejeweled game, except now, I don't know, the crystals are in 3D and there's like unique chiming sounds, and that's my standout element, I'm not going to capture the market because there's nothing new. Like, yes, I am appealing to the same mechanics as that slice I'm interested in, but because there's nothing new and interesting that people can engage with and try out and see how it like plays in the game, I'm not going to attract the same kinds of player counts as some of these other titles, so a new game that does bring something new to the table. And a lot of times it really is just presentation. Just having two people battle it out fighting while you're doing your score thing, that can be enough to make it interesting to pull over a large amount of that player base. Because the goal here, as even as indies, is not to create something brand new and build a market. Like, those days are multiple generations behind us, right? There's already markets. There's already markets for every kind of game out there. Like any kind of genre you can imagine, you could probably find a game out there and you can find a niche community that enjoys it. So now, as designers, what we should really be focusing on is, what are they playing? What do they like? And how do I bring my own twist to these mechanics, to this presentation?
Something I took out of what we were just talking about here is if we went forward with building the idle clicker game that we've been talking about, even though like we've got like this twist on it where it's like it's streamer related, it doesn't mean that our target audience is streamer, like people that enjoy watching streamers. Our target audience would still be or what could still possibly be the people that enjoy this genre. So that means that we would want to find a balance between the giving that core game to the people that like it, but then also putting in some of like the streamer elements and stuff like that, but in a way that doesn't alienate either audience. If we go too hard into stream culture, then people from the clicker audience might not be able to understand it or be interested in it. But if we go too hard the other way, then we might end up just more of like another generic one with a couple small minor things that doesn't make it stand out enough that it would be interesting for people to play.
I think that's too far. You're going too far into it at that point, right? And that's what's hard. It's hard to understand where to go with that, because what's the core essence, if you will, the game feel of the herb clicker game that we're doing? It's a clicker game. Like, that's the core essence. All mechanics are all based around clicking herbs, getting points, spending them on sponsorship to get new herbs, to get more points, to change how the points work. Our unique element is the live streams, but that's not a new add-on that we're forcing into this existing mechanics. What we're doing is we're saying, here's the overlay, literally the presentation of live streaming. Well, what's involved with that? Well, there's a chat. We talked about a chat, right? How the chat ranks up with your score gives you a bonus. Well, we're not creating a brand new system that's foreign to idle or clicker games. What we're saying is that system is literally the chat. The chat is the representation of how big your bonus is and how many extra points you're getting. Take that a little further. What we could do is implement stuff like trolls. Maybe there's a troll and we have some unique way of identifying them in the chat. And what's new about our idle clicker game is you have to click on them and a little message comes up, and we can program funny insults to just randomly generate. And then you have to click a button to ban them as the streamer, right? Otherwise, they ruin your score multiplier. That is still mechanically very common with all clicker style games, right? A way of trying to manage your production, if you will, of your points to get more points. Our representation of, here's a live stream, here's a chat, this is sponsors, this is a troll. Those are just fancy words. That's just the outer wrapping. The core essence of the game is still a clicker, right? So anybody who likes clicker games is fundamentally going to enjoy this process. Now, whether or not we do something like, say, a bunch of rude stuff and people are like, I don't like how this thing talks to me, I'm not interested in it, that's not because it's a live stream. That's because we put something rude in. But fundamentally, as the live stream element, I don't think that conflicts. Like, we don't have to worry about people who are like, well, I'm not a live streamer, because truth is, everybody wants to do live streaming. Everybody would love to just stream games all day or talk about whatever expertise they have. Everybody has, at some degree, a fantasy of doing that. Maybe it's just building chairs and showing the process and recording it. Everybody has that fantasy, but nobody's going to really put the effort in to go through and do that. So we are offering the fantasy of that, except all the work you have to do is play a clicker game. You don't have to build streams. You don't have to understand how sponsorships work. You don't have to worry about camera quality or managing a chat. All of that stuff is just pleasantly glossed over and set up for you. And this is just a fun game to tinker with, and funny things happen, right? That's really how the live stream part works into that game, in my opinion. I could be wrong. Maybe you have a different viewpoint on it, but does that clarification as to why I thought you were going too far, like, does that make sense?
Yeah.
Cool. I apologize.
100%.
There's tons of talking.
No. I think it was all good.
It's a lot, right? And I fundamentally believe these early steps to rule out games before you build game treatments is why a lot of indies struggle, is because they didn't put the time in to really think about these things, and then they just built a game and it's fun and it's interesting, and then they get discouraged because now it's like 10 times harder, when they could have just had somebody show them this step early and save them the trouble. Just because a game isn't a good fit for whatever you decide in terms of market opportunity, artistic considerations, etc., it doesn't mean that it's always going to be a bad idea. It just means not right now. Because you could come back later and you're so much more experienced and skilled and you've done one game. Maybe now's the time to do that other idea. So yeah, it's not never, it's just not right now. This is the best game to pick for what I want to do, right? That's how I want people to start thinking about this. So market opportunity, get back on track. That's all done. Next, artistic considerations. Have you thought at all about how the visual presentation of the game is? Like, if you sat there and you closed your eyes, what does that game look like to you?
Since we talked about a bunch of other stuff, now there's certain things that I'm starting to like second guess from, like, was this actually a good idea or not? I'll just throw everything out on the table that I had. I was thinking something kind of like Papers, Please meets Twitch Plays Pokemon meets like Viva Pinata on drugs. Like visually unstable UI, like at times with like some different like glitched effects and like hyper commercial overlays, and then leaning into absurdity. But like bringing it back together with like a fake but plausible corporate aesthetic. I hope, does that answer?
Anybody who is aspiring to design, not just games, but just design, right? You've got to be hyper specific. Like, you really got to break it down. So everything you said is good, but it's still so generic. I don't actually know what you're trying to say. I don't actually I can't picture in my head what it is you're trying to tell me. And that's not wrong. Like, you didn't do anything wrong. It's just, it's a skill that you develop because you have to do a lot of this. You have to go back and forth a lot with people. You have to go back and forth and understand certain ways of describing things, colors, shapes, orientation, also body movements. Like, even when we're talking about Bejeweled and I'm trying to describe the game to you, I literally use my hands and my camera, right, to be like, this half of the screen does this and this half of the screen does that. And by doing that, I'm guiding you to mentally picture what I'm talking about, right? Because it gives visual anchoring. As designers, you have to use tons of tricks of the trade, if you will, to do that, to be like, this is how I'm going to show you visually, aesthetically. If I have to write notes, if I have to build a dungeon out of sticky notes so you understand like the layout of what I'm talking about, any tool you can use, you should use, because you want it to be as clear as possible. Like, the ideal game design document is something you could hand to 10 different people and they all come back with the exact same game. Like, that is the perfect like perfection of like a senior game designer. That's what you would want to achieve. Is that possible? Of course not. Like, that's if you can't achieve that, that doesn't mean you're bad at design. It just means that that's how big the gap is. There's such a huge spectrum. And we just want to get closer to that unified understanding.
Okay, so what I did wrong with this then was I was thinking more on just like the terminology of what I wanting. I wasn't actually thinking about like the visual, like package of it all.
Wrong's not the right word, but just that like this is the next way, the next step up for you to figure out how to do that more effectively, right? Like if I was going to describe a truck to you, I wouldn't be like, it's a short box with windows on it and like a long box that's kind of hollow in the back so you can put stuff in it and it's on four wheels. Like we have a mental library growing up of seeing millions of trucks. We understand what you're talking about. But to somebody who's probably never seen a truck before, they're going to be like, what are you on? Like, what are you smoking? Like, that doesn't like, it's on a box on wheels like that, and it's hollow, but there's another box with like windows on it. So the idea is trying to, at the same time, capitalize on that visual library, the common understanding we all have, and at the same time, not relying on it. Like, you want it to be easy to communicate, but it has to be understandable by other people who are not you and are not people like you. Because when you go talk to an audio guy and you're trying to explain the scene to him, you got to think about that. He's thinking in terms of like distance and acoustics and what kind of objects and all the different audio terminology of how he's supposed to work in this game, in this boss room, in this level, etc. And you have to describe that to him. But you're not an audio person, you're a designer. So you got to learn that side of it. And this is where terminology is a very long-term thing in the industry, because that's just the audio guy. You got the programmer, you got the visual effects guy, you got the level designers, you have the artists, you have the user interface people, you have production managers, you have voice actors. You still have to effectively communicate a scene to a voice actor before they've even seen the scene, right? That they understand the tone and what's happening. So anytime you see a voice acting where you're like, whoa, this is not like, this just feels wrong for what's happening on screen, chances are that voice actor never even saw it. They just read a description and are like, oh, I think he sounds like this, and they go in that direction. And then if you don't have somebody who's really good at communicating what the feel and the experience is, you're not going to have a good, like, cohesive, efficient development. So the voice actor, and I'm just going to hinge on that one for a second, he's not going to know. He's not going to know that you're going for like the super scary vibe, and this character isn't supposed to be like nonchalantly shocked. Like, they're supposed to be terrified. And with enough back and forth, what happens in the industry, you can't effectively communicate, and eventually a producer or a project manager is like, yo, we're running out of time and money. Like, whatever is the best pick, take it and go, because we got to get this done. And that's how bad VO, right, tends to make it into final cuts, is because somewhere along the line, it was not clear what they were supposed to be delivering. It's not that the voice actor necessarily was bad. They got hired because they were good. The problem was there wasn't any understanding into what they were delivering and what was expected of being delivered. Complicated, it's tough, but you know, if you don't think about that stuff, you can make things really difficult later. So anyways, artistic considerations. Coming back to that, all good. Like, I think that on a surface level, everything you said, I was pretty much on board with too. That's what I was thinking as well. Except what I was thinking in terms of, if I close my eyes and I'm trying to describe the scene to you, we have, and I'm going to make use of our camera space. I don't know if we're recording these on video. If we are, great. And
yeah,
I'm going to
this will also be up on YouTube as well. And there's a video version on Spotify.
Oh, awesome. Okay, perfect. So I'm going to use my screen space here. And it's a little, my screen's like super tiny, but the point is, we have a room, right? So along the top, there's going to be a menu button where it's just going to be like, you know, here's your typical file and like your main menu button and all the different, maybe there's statistics, and then we have performance, like your stream performance, and then we have sponsors, which is basically going to be the shop, right? And then we can have, you know, any other, all of our menu up there is my point. In the background here, right, this is where we're going to have the whole room, which is just kind of almost similar to the layout of my little makeshift office here, right? But in the corner, probably on this side, we'll put the corner line here. And then in this corner is your mom, who's just sick on the bed. And so over here, we're going to have like maybe just like a little table edge in the corner. Here's your chat box. Over here is like your points, your currency that we can have. And then down here is like your collection of stuff that you're feeding people. like your UI icons. This is green herb, blue herb, red herb, etc. Right? And so how it's going to play out is if you visually imagine when you see a streamer who's not on stream, it's just like a bright light is shone out through a ring light behind the camera, right? And we have like a camera perspective. We could do a little distortion maybe in the game engine to make it look like a movable tripod camera. And that's how we're going to present the scene. And it's your mom just sit there. Independent of art style, we could have it when you click on a herb, the herb just goes poof in like above her mouth, and then like she eats it. And it doesn't need a long animation. It's just like, right? Like her mouth just like a big gulping fish. And then you get your points, right? And it's up here. It's just a little like bing, right? +1. Each of the herbs, they have different effects. And when you eat too many, it just applies a modifier to your stream, your score, and visually for the darker satire, we affect the mother in some way, which is she grows horns, she changes color, maybe she gets really skinny, maybe she turns to bubblegum. Like, who knows where we could take it, right? Because it's that corporate satire, which makes me think of Offworld or Otherworld, sorry, right?
Yeah, okay.
Where it's like hyper corporate, like dark, right? Same kind of vibe, right? But that in essence is how I imagine the game as a whole, the artistic considerations. All the menus will just open up as a pop-up with a very standard, you've probably seen many of them testing out different clicker games, where it's just all the menu items and how things are going to work out. Sponsorships could just be different companies that offer a certain herb that has maybe a bonus that we show the players. This one's worth 3 points. This one's worth 2 points. This one has a stacking bonus modifier, but it costs like 10,000 herb, like streamer points. But the stacking modifier is like the more you click it, the more it adds 0.01% to your score. So like you're motivated as a player to keep clicking it like crazy to build out that multiplier really high. But you can't click any more than like 100 or something, right? We could put in some kind of warning system where you have to do a different herb so it doesn't reset. It prevents your bonus from being reset. So now that's a fun management style mechanic. That's how I'm envisioning it in my head. Sponsors as well, and this is a third element that's more complex. I would say this is a wish list item that we've talked many of times of how I view wish lists, where there's another category tab up here for sponsors, except it's product placements, which is also very common in live streaming and, similar kinds of channels, YouTube's, etc., where I'm going to upgrade her bed. Oh, I'm going to put a flashy poster on the wall from this company, which is like another ad to eat herbs or something. And we're going to get a very small 0.5% bonus on all the points we earn because we're spending money to product place different things around the hospital room for our mom. And maybe it's really silly things. Maybe we put clown shoes on her, or we do something like that where it is dark. It's dark and satire. Like, here's a funny product placement on my sick mom that we're trying to cure, but we're putting it on her anyway because this is how we're going to make money and find a cure for her, right? Like that, I think that aligns with the goals. However, that's a lot of work. That's a lot of work to program and like manually place things so that when you unlock the clown flower that squirts in her face randomly once in a while, that has to go on the desk beside her sick table, right? Things like that. So I'm done. That's my artistic considerations. That's everything I'm thinking about visually, about like how the menus would open, where things are located, how like we'd show points coming up, how the chat is going to scroll up.
Okay, no, I like that. I was able to visualize the whole thing. I was still thinking on it more of like the beginning of like the concept kind of thing versus the expectation was to go in more of like what's the visual of how everything will look, where's everything placed and stuff like that. So I can see now the big difference on what actually needed to be done with it.
Yeah, and hopefully with thinking about it like the way I've kind of like shown the difference here. You said you did more game treatment based work. So thinking back about all the stuff you did for that game treatment and how I have presented like the artistic consideration, how much do you think that has impacted your game treatment?
It now has me sitting here thinking where it's like, you know what, this is actually maybe feeding herbs to like a sick mother is a little too dark.
And alternatively, I was thinking the same thing. What if it's just you as the streamer? This is my character eating this stuff for sponsorships.
Yes, yeah, that's kind of what I was thinking too. Because then it also gives people the opportunity to connect more with the two. Because if a nice two could be, can you customize how the character looks? So people could try to make themselves, or they could make as close to as they can with what's in there to like make other streamers they enjoy watching. And
yeah,
and not like here's your dying mother. We're gonna just feed her things so you can make money.
and so this is another thing to think about for like market opportunity. Part of the market opportunity with our addition, our presentation, is that kind of darker, sadistic humor, right? So now that we've had time to visualize and it's processed a little, more, we're both kind of on the fence of being like, I don't know, maybe not, right? And so now we can go back and say, okay, well, we still have a good game idea, but because we haven't, hypothetically, we haven't done our game treatment yet, we still have time to change it, and it's okay to change it. We can, like, this is all a work in progress, right? The only time you want to not change it is when you've started your game treatment stuff, because then it becomes harder, right? It becomes harder to change. So for now, yeah, we could just change it so it's your own character. You just pick a starting streamer, right? If we even want to go that way, and then here's a character. Now, the complication here, player customization.
That affects animations and how things interact with it too.
Everything else down the line, right? So maybe we don't do player customization. Maybe we just have one character. It's just, here's my character. And like at that point, it's much, much easier to do things like customizing with hats, right? Like I unlocked a hat. It just sits on my head in 2D or 3D space. And we just don't animate it. It's just like an add-on, right? To help us. There's things we could do to figure that stuff out. So yeah, artistic considerations, it's really good to break it down that way and think about it and like long term break it down. Sorry, not long term, but like in depth visually, how would things kind of coordinate? Because it's going to influence everything else down the line. And so my second question would be, with the game treatment stuff that you've already done, how much of it now is actually, like when you're thinking about it, actually feels tighter, like it feels better pulled together having visualized it? So my first question
amount
was,
of it, yeah.
Yeah, and that's the other part of it is it helps you pull away from things, but it also makes things a lot tighter. So you're like, oh, I can visualize how these abstract words and different categories and headings actually work together now. Yeah, and so like the next category I'd recommend for people are business restrictions, right? Your cost restrictions. What's the actual impact of trying to build this game?
I have zero experience with this, so my first thought is it doesn't cost us anything.
As do most indies. That's the response. Oh, it's free. No, it's not. It's not free, right?
But we don't just like write some stuff out, put some visuals to it, and then just make money?
No, God, no. How are you going to make those visuals? How are we going to make the character?
With programs I already own.
But do you own them or do you pay for them? Because here's the thing. Most indies will say, well, I use Photoshop regularly because I like Photoshop and I just use it. So I'm not going to include this as a cost to make this game. That's bad. It's bad because what if at some point down the future, you and I get called up by a publisher or somebody who's interested in these kinds of games, and they're like, hey, I want to donate. Hey, I want to publish your game. I want to manage the mobile distribution of your game because I'm following along. If our thing is like, oh, it cost us $0 to make. Well, first of all, that's not true. But secondly, now we're being asked how much money we need to finish the game. Well, your mindset is already, well, it's free. So like, I guess I can do it for like, I need like $30,000 to maybe make it through for the end of the year. I can live off of that. My family can live off of that. That's what I'll ask for. Also bad. And that's also what happens a lot of times because you don't understand how much stuff actually costs, right? So for us, our biggest cost restrictions are, in my opinion, are going to be art and time. not a great I'm not a great 2D artist. So if we do something in 2D, it's going to be pretty tough, right? For me to do. I don't know about on your end.
I genuinely, I'm probably about the same boat.
Okay, so
We
it
might be able to make
seems
something work, but it'd be hit or miss if
rough.
it. Yeah,
It'd
either
be
it's going to
rough,
turn out amazing, or we're going to be like, I don't know what we did here.
right? So the likelihood that once we got further enough for far enough along that this was something fun and interesting, we're naturally going to want to make it look better. We're going to have to hire somebody or find somebody to also volunteer for free, which just makes a ton of extra complicated work related things and business related things and lawyer related things and accountant like etc. We are not prepared to, as a indie team that's never made a game before, to even think about doing that stuff, let alone afford those services from accountants, professionals, lawyers, etc. Right? So there's an actual cost associated with all that stuff. So the easiest route is to say, well, we're going to find a freelance artist who has an art style we like, who can do this work for us. Well, we should expect to spend anywhere from $1,000 to $3,000 testing people, giving them small things to, like, draw my character, draw the layout of the room, please. Like, here's the small sample I need you to make for me. And if we like it, great. If we don't, we move on to the next artist until we find the art style we want for our game. That costs money just to vet the artists. Now we have to pay them for all the content we want to make. We're not ready to itemize all the art we need made, but we should just very quickly be able to look through like our mental visualization and say, okay, well, how many buttons are there? There's like 20 buttons. Those all need art. We have a chat screen that's going to need art. We have a sponsor screen that's going to need art. Each of those 20 menus are actually going to have a sub menu with like a scrolling bar and like an icon, probably word text, maybe a symbol. That's all going to be art. And so you should be able to just think in your head and just do a very rough calculation and say, okay, well, we're going to need probably close to 200 assets with the room. And if we do product placement, which I said was a wish list item, if we do product placement, we need art for all those product placements.
Same thing with all the herbs and the medicine as well.
All the herbs, all the medicine. So, saying 200-300 art assets is actually probably pretty close, if not enough, really. So, but you got to think about that and be like, okay, well, how long is it going to take a 2D artist roughly to do all those icons? Well, if we just use standard industry stuff from somebody who's not a senior, this is the key thing. People always want to do the cheaper option. You should never do that as an indie. Assume somebody's not going to get it right the first time. Assume you're going to spend 4 hours of back and forth before you train up that artist to really understand how you like to visually present icons before they can just do it the first time. Right? That's money, that's time. And so add that all up, and yeah, you're probably looking at spending close to 10 grand minimum.
Well,
And
what
that's
about things
for
like Fiverr, where you can go through and like see the art styles and find people that are making stuff specifically towards like what you're looking at? Because there's people that their whole Fiverr career is just on making icons in like a specific art style and stuff like that. Or is that also just kind of situational, where it's like if you can find the right person, then awesome? But
it's the same boat. The only difference is when you go to Fiverr, everybody's going to Fiverr because it's easy. It's easy just to go to a catalog of like, I need UI artists. Here's 100 UI artists who has an art style I like. I'll start testing with them. There's nothing wrong with that. Many studios do that. What becomes more of an issue later is, wow, our game looks like all 30 other games this artist has done UI for. Because it's not something you're going to notice right away when they're first putting icons together for you and you're implementing them and, oh, this looks great. And then you're online one day and you're like, oh, well, I chose somebody who's well experienced in clicker games. And I am noticing that like 3 of our biggest clicker games that are similar to us all look the same. Well, our presentation is different, but how much do we care about that market opportunity of presenting something different? Because people are simple in the sense that they like easy answers. When they see our app on the mobile store on Steam, they're going to see a small icon. They're going to see a game screen. They're going to flip through a couple screens and be like, oh, this looks exactly like that game that uses that same asset. Is this an asset flip? Next. That's a very real thing that happens now because everybody is going to the same artists all the time. For that reason, is that they don't want to develop their own art style, etc. And again, not bad. You could do that. You can be very successful doing that. Monetarily, you could be very successful doing that. However, that is part of the business risk associated with just going to somebody who's easily accessible. There is nothing wrong with taking your time, reaching out to artists on gaming developer discords, even online, Facebook groups, Reddit groups, and trying to find somebody who's maybe not on Fiverr. What if it's somebody who's willing to work as a junior? They've never really done it before. We, as an indie team, are of the mindset, well, we're not paying ourselves to do this work. So how comfortable are we with sitting down for nearly an hour a day or every other day to hop on a call with this potential junior, this person who's trying to break into the industry, and train them to achieve the result we want? Now, if you have no artistic background and you don't know how to talk to an artist, that's going to be a lot of work. And you're not going to know how to do it effectively. It's going to be a little frustrating. You definitely shouldn't take it out on the artist. I see lots of indie people coming out there and claiming that artists are scammers, don't work with them, etc., stuff like that. Please don't ever do that. Your artist is just a means of producing a product. And as I mentioned, if you can't describe to that artist exactly what you're looking for and guide them to get to that point, that's kind of on you as the designer, as the game director, as the person who's trying to build this project. It's not the artist's fault. It's yours.
So it's kind of like when you asked me to describe the stuff earlier and I just said a bunch of words that didn't really give you any inkling of what I was actually thinking of myself. And that's the same kind of situation that some artists find themselves in if someone doesn't know how to talk the artist language.
It's what a lot of people in the indie space run into, even myself. Right? I've worked I've covered high, near executive positions for some companies who are getting started, and they've come back to me and called me a number of names and claimed I was a liar and I didn't have the skills and etc. But I had been doing this for 10 years for other people, and I've never once had these problems. The problem came from this particular team I worked with fell into this category I'm talking about, where they could not effectively visualize, understand what they wanted to achieve, and communicate it. Is the and part. They knew what they wanted, but they could not tell you, and it was very difficult. And so when you're working on larger scale games, which we were, it's really hard to coordinate complicated systems that are half developed already, sometimes finished, and then new things come along because you find out that it doesn't work exactly as intended. But now you have to go to other programmers, other artists, animators, and be like, look, we have to change these things. And it's fundamentally how we made the art needed to be redone because they just didn't work the way we were told for it to work. And so it became a very stressful position to be in, to try and coordinate other people to match a forever moving target, right? And so you don't want to be that person, especially in India, because time is money. We're trying to do this. This is a big risk. It's hard to learn to do it. So you have to be flexible. You have to understand in your own head, as the designer, as the game director, that you are not perfect. And if you do not have years of extensively building games, maybe you have years of experience doing other work. It doesn't really matter. You're doing games now. You have to be very thorough with your communication. You have to make sure everybody understands exactly what you're saying, and don't just assume they do. Ask follow-up questions, reorient questions, ask somebody to repeat something back to you. Ask them if it makes sense. Give them time to speak. I do a lot of speaking, but hopefully I'm doing some of these things with you so that people can see that. They can understand. They're like, oh, this is actually how this is supposed to work. This is how I'm supposed to ask you if you understand what I just said. And at the same time, don't take it personally if somebody's like, I have no idea what you just said. Right? It's like, don't get frustrated. Yes, it's difficult. Yes, it's irritating, but don't let that bother you as the person who's doing the talking. Like I said, use your hands, use visual aids, talk about things that are common knowledge, like a menu bar. Everybody knows what a menu bar is who uses a computer, right? We can all instantly visualize that. Use terminology like that to help people understand. And then in time, you're going to start getting back what you want. What's also really hard as an indie is understanding when you change based off of the feed, what you're given. A lot of times you will get, let's say, a character concept back or a piece of UI art back, and you're like, man, this is pretty well exactly what I wanted, but I don't like it. That's not the artist's fault. That's not the programmer's fault or the audio guy's fault. It's your tastes have changed as you've been developing this game. As you've seen these parts come, go from paper and discussion to physical or digital prototype where you can see them molding together, understand that your own wants and needs have changed. The wants and needs of the game have changed. It's not a bad artist necessarily. It's not, that you were bad. It's just things have evolved. And understanding and accepting that it's a work in progress is going to be the most beneficial to anybody getting started in the industry. In essence, that's kind of business cost restrictions is when you're working. The other part of this is not just looking at assets that we can't do and what we necessarily don't want to do. You also have to look at like cost in general. You and I have a time, like we have time that we're dedicating to do that. We have time we're dedicating right now. Right now is time we are putting into this project. So this like past hour, 2 hour, 3 hours, if we put 2 videos together, maybe that's 6 hours worth of work between the two of us. What would our hourly rate be if I was a business and I have 2 designers working together to build this game for me? I have to pay them. Right? I have to pay them. That's so cruel to make somebody work for free. Even if it's royalties later, there should be some form of how do we recoup? How do we give value back to the people who are working on this game? You want to account for all costs you may need as a business, and that'll tell you how much your game or your studio will cost to start making this project. If that's a scary number, if that's a number you can't fathom and you can't figure out a way to reduce costs, for example, you and I working for free because we're doing it for this podcast, we can eliminate a huge chunk of cost. That's great. If we find another person who's willing to come on as an artist and just like rev share anything that comes out of it, great. We can approach that and eliminate that cost. But the idea here is to objectively look at it as an expense and say, am I comfortable spending this money and this time? Because this is going to take a lot of time to make. If I only have a summer, if I have my summer break, all right, I'm an indie. I just got out of school, high school, maybe I'm grade 11, or I'm out of university and I have 2-month window where I don't have to worry about expenses yet. I'm younger, and I'm just picking that because it seems to be the biggest crowd for like the indie space trying to learn. Really think of that as a resource. Be like, okay, well, do I have 2 months? No, I don't. I actually have 3, not even maybe necessarily 1 to 3 hours per day. And on weekends, I get to stay up late. Maybe my parents aren't too strict about that. And I can work for like 4 or 5 hours overnight and sleep in the next day. So really every week I have between 10 to 15 hours to work on this game. So over the course of 2 months, you actually only have 60 hours a month. You have 120 hours to build this game. That is your cost restriction in terms of time. If you can't logically think about all the different steps for programming, how long it takes you to learn to build something, how long it takes you to debug, which is the whole thing we'll get into in the future, like all these steps. If you can't logically say, I can get this done in 120 hours, you shouldn't do it. Right now, before we get into game treatment and we get into like actually developing like the design of the game, we really have to hypothetically sit down and say an estimate and say, what's the cost of doing this in terms of money, in terms of time? Because if that answer is no, and that doesn't feel good, that's not a bad thing. That means that this is too big of scope for you and whoever you're making this game with. You need to go back and either reduce the scope of the game, cut out content, make it simpler, make it shorter, or you have to go with a different idea. And so this is why I apologize. I went into so much detail, but that's why, because this is the final last check, this business cost, and not just saying, oh, it's free. Not, sorry, I don't mean it that way with how you said it, but a lot of people just
I get
casually are like, oh, it's free, right? That's much better. Oh, it's free. Like I can donate my time. You can't think that way because it blinds you to what's actually involved. So yeah, account for all that stuff, make a quick estimate and say, are you comfortable with that? Is it achievable? If it's not, you should not make this game. And a lot of indies will go through all these different steps right up until the business costs and restrictions, and then just be like, well, I'm doing it for free, or it's not going to be expensive. And they'll make a bunch of excuses to start working on the game because they've gone through all this visualization and everything else. They're excited. They want to keep going. That's how you fail. That's one of the biggest steps that set you up to fail. So if you're listening, don't cheap out. Don't skip this step because it's boring and it's like crushing your motivation and stuff. Do it. Because if you need to pull back and be like, nope, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to do a simple distance game where we're just going to aim a cannon in the sky and fire a bouncy ball and see how far it goes. I'm going to try and make that fun because that's something I could do in my time restriction, in my budget restriction. And that's a good thing. It's a good thing because you can actually finish it. And when you're building indie games, you need to finish your game. That's the number one goal, is you want to finish it. And this hard cost analysis, this hard business approach, is how you determine whether or not you can even finish it.
Yeah, which we're going to go through, and we'll end up having an example of, well, not an example, an actual full go through of it with our game here. So if anybody's unsure of how to approach it or how to go through and do it, we'll be able to. Well, James will lead us through setting it up.
Yeah, we'll
Sorry,
definitely
James.
cover it in detail.
No, it's
all good. It's all good. I have plenty of spreadsheets I can use to get through this.
Excellent. I love a good spreadsheet.
Don't we all? Yeah. So I mean, that in a nutshell is how you should approach validating an idea before you go into really figuring out what are all the mechanics, what are all the equations, what are all the different elements and bonuses and stuff. It's not going to be as easy as how it probably sounded on here because I have the background to think about that stuff just all the time.
Yeah, there's a lot of stuff here that I never even would have crossed my mind.
Yeah, so it's okay to take time to do this. Realistically, you should do this maybe 2 or 3 times so that you can like really have a solid base to feel comfortable going forward with. But those are your beginning steps, right? From here, what we would do is we would move on to do like formal elements, which are things like, what is the player's role? What are the objectives? Like, let's write on paper exactly what is the player doing here? What are they trying to do? What are the rules? How do things work? Like, do we really like the idea of sponsorships? How does sponsorships work? We don't need to know the coding. We don't need to know the mathematical equation. We just need to know, oh, you have +1 of this sponsor, you get plus percentage points. That is enough, right?
See, and coming into all of this, I thought that was the first step. And then from there, we decided if we would want to do it or not. And then would come the stuff that we've all just started doing now, or that we did this in this episode.
Yeah, it's actually reversed, and it's not just you. That's like I said, many people in the indie space when they're first starting, and just in games in general on the design side, will do that. They'll do that. The writing things down and breaking them down because, in a way, in a very big way, it's easier. It's easier for me to just be like, oh, I know that jumping mechanic is this, and I push this button and I do that, and I wrote it down, and this feels good. I'm making planning progress. Let's keep the momentum going, right? It keeps you focused on the design. But hopefully by now it should be pretty clear that why that other stuff comes first. Like, is it aligned with your goals, technically feasible, market opportunity, artistic considerations, business cost restrictions? Like that stuff is actually more important, because if you're not green lit on all those other items, it doesn't matter what you write down. So you just want to be efficient with our time.
Genuinely, when we came into this, I thought we were just going to be able to go through both of them one episode, no problem. But it turns out there was a lot of stuff here that I had misconceptions of, and things I didn't fully understand to what degree we actually needed to be doing parts. So I think, like, this episode is for sure gonna, like, that's just the clicker game here, and I think the next episode we're gonna go through the same process again, but with the other game. But I feel like that one's gonna, now that there's more of an understanding and there's a lot of this stuff that we've learned here, I think it's gonna be a lot easier to get through. Hopefully, ideally, and it'll be a very different experience. So I'm excited to see how different it'll be, because I've got a lot of different prep work to do this next time.
Well, what I'd like to see next time is you actually take the lead with the other game concept, and like take everything we talked about and just do that presentation for me. Because if you follow the same steps and you go through it, I won't really have a lot to say, right? Like, there will be nothing more to tell you. It's just using those same skills and how to think about it. And then when you present it, it'll just be very quick. Is like, does it align? Well, we covered it last time. We know it aligns with what we want to do. It's just a matter of whether or not you think it's technically feasible, right? If you think something is like really big or could be an issue, we could talk about that, but bring it up. Otherwise, mostly talking our market opportunity for that game, and how do you visualize it? What are the artistic considerations behind that game? Now, the one thing that's going to be maybe a little more challenging for you is going to be that your artistic considerations isn't just art in a visual sense. Because like clicker game, yeah, I had it way easier. It's just art. Really, beeps and boops. But yours, that game is going to be around narration. It's going to have audio cues. It's going to have environmental elements that we're going to have to stage. We're going to have to stage and set up a situation where I think for you, my recommendation is to go through one small narrative element of how you visualize it playing out, because that'll help
like
you
one
figure
scene.
One scene. Like I believe it was a well I talked about in the last one, where like the person comes up to the well, etc. Think of a scene like that. Maybe not that one. Do your own, whatever you like. But think about it, how it plays out. Character comes to this spot. This is how it looks on screen. This is when this cue comes in. Is it spatial audio based, or is it just like audio that comes in through speakers, right? Stereo or mono. Think about that. Think about the audio narration. Do we have dialogue options? Or is it just it plays out a narrative dynamically and the player doesn't get dialogue options? Their dialogue options is which path they chose to walk down, right? Those are pretty big things to think about. So that's going to be your biggest challenge, I think, is incorporating those other elements that we didn't have to for this time. And then give a shot at the business stuff and just take a crack at it and be like, okay, here's the volume of work. You don't need to put a number value to it. You just have to be able to quantify it roughly.
Okay.
So yeah, I'd love to see that back, and then we can run through that.
Yeah, well, that's going to be our next episode then.
Yeah, sounds great.
Is there anything else you wanted to add or say to this one before we wrap it up? Is there anything that we missed or didn't get to that we should have?
I mean, there's so much to it, but no, I think that for our aligned goals for what we want to do with this process, I think it's good. I think this is a good point for where hopefully anybody who is already in the industry or is thinking about it, right, trying to get in, etc. This gives them a lot to think about, and it gives them context as to why to think about it that way. So whenever you're looking elsewhere, you're reading other books or whatnot, you understand more about like why there's a certain way to do things.
Oh yeah, well, because there was also a few times too while you were going through and explaining all this stuff. I was just sitting there just like, oh man, is this really what I actually want to do?
Yeah.
Thankfully,
right?
when we got to as we kept going through, I'm like, yeah, no, it definitely is. But there were times out there where I was listening. And I'm like, oh man, this is This is so much more than I signed up for.
Yeah, yeah, and so this
and we haven't even gotten to actually making anything yet.
I know, not even close. But that's a great point to put up, to bring up, because you know, great things are not easily done, right? The things that are going to bring us like the biggest joy, the things that are going to have the biggest impact, all of that stuff's not easy in life in general. So if this is really interesting to you, the listener, and you really want to do this, you really want to learn this process, I think it's important to not just spray sunshine and daisies at you. Like I want you to understand that this is hard. This is a difficult industry. It's a difficult job, but it's very rewarding when it goes right. Like you make some fun things. So don't get scared. Of course it's hard. It's good. It's good to be hard, that it's hard. It's challenging. You can come back stronger. You can come back with version 2. So just keep going. Having the passion is great. Just don't let anybody tell you that it's always fun, it's always fantastic, that things are easy. Oh, look how quickly I can make a game. Like don't fall for that. It's going to be tough, but it's going to be fun along the way. Last thing I want to say, not related to any of the podcast stuff, is just that if you're listening and you are making a game, right? Or you want to be involved in the process, follow it, want to ask questions. Maybe you're working on a design and you want feedback from either one of us on any of the stuff we talked about today, like goals and feasibility, etc. Join our Discord. We got the links, I hope, somewhere.
Yeah, in the
right?
description.
Yeah, and just hop in. Just introduce yourself. Just be like, hi, I'm so and so. This is what I want to do, and I have some questions. And ideally, we want to build up a community of people who are all engaging, where you can get feedback, where you can get the guidance to ask the questions that you just can't find answers to. Come on down.
I also unlocked a new fear today. Like it feels like there's a difference between just jumping right in, making a game and putting it out there and it not working versus like going through all the steps that we are now and then putting it out there and it's still not working. Like both suck, but I don't know, it's just like I've never felt this kind of tightness in my chest before where it's like, oh dear God. But it's also thrilling. It's also exciting in its own way with that. So just in case anybody else out there is also fearing the same thing where they're like, I don't want to put all that effort in because all this extra effort, if it's not going to work anyways, well, you're not the only one that fears that.
If you listen to a lot of big developers, right, big designers, a lot of them have the viewpoint that as long as one person connects with what I make, it's all worth it. And that is a very healthy mindset to make, because if we make this game and our kids, our nephews, our buddy, maybe your mom plays it and she's like, this is hilarious. And then she keeps playing it. That's good. That's great. That like we achieved it, right? What's the rest of it is just a gamble. And that's okay. We could do things and eventually we will get there where we could do things about marketing. Like how do we take what we're making and actually show it to people? Where do we go? What Discords do we join? What people do we go to get reliable information? Like experienced marketers, way better than I could ever hope to be, right? Like who are they? How does that process look like? And we will talk about that. And then from there, yeah, maybe nobody likes it, but that's okay. Then we just try the other game.
Then we just make another one.
We just make another one. It's fine.